Welcome to Racetalk TV, a show about local racing, past and present, with our hosts Bill Gritt and Bobby Potts. This is the Nostalgia Show, and now from Access TV in Salina, Kansas, it's Racetalk, Part 1. Special thanks to Mom Construction, Salina Speedway, Flatlands Media, DJ Mean Dean, Karen Gebhardt for getting the pizza, the Potts family for providing refreshments, Access TV for use of their studio. Brought to you by Mom Construction, Lindsborg, Kansas. Over 50 years of service, offering road building, site grading, pavement removal, laser GPS grade control. Learn more at www.momco.com or call 785-227-5059. Of course, our friends at Salina Speedway, Friday Night Racing. Come out there and visit with them. They're great folks. Thanks for the support.
Welcome to Racetalk TV on Salina Access. Tonight is our Racetalk Nostalgia Show. Bobby's done a great job of putting together a good group of guests. Again, it's Bobby Potts and Bill Gritt with you here.
So it's going to be a fun night, I think. We got an exciting bunch of guys here. I think that's going to be fun.
They've been jabbering off camera like crazy. We'll see how they do when we turn the cameras on.
They got real quiet now.
Yeah, it just got dead silent in here. Our guests tonight are none other than Mike Hughes, Jack Petty, Sam Brittendall. Shelby Stinson couldn't make it. Jerry Phillips is here, and of course Mel Potts. These guys have raced for years at Salina Speedway. Anybody that has any history with the racetrack at all knows all of these names.
You know, I wish I would have put all the years together with all these guys, all the service. Yeah, it'd be a bunch. So,
you know, this racing family we're a part of is unique, you know, and it is a family. You know, you grew up in it. I ended up in it in the late 70s, and I watched these guys, and it's kind of amazing to sit here and chat with them. You know, Mike comes to us with 42 years of announcing. That's fairly lengthy, Mike. Thanks for making the trip over here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's great being here with all these guys.
You know, Mike, all the racetracks, I know you're the current voice of RPM Speedway, and name some of the others. I know Joaquini's in there, Stockton, Osborne.
I did Joaquini for a long time up until last year, and I kind of gave that up. I turned 60, and I thought I was the youngest one here, but I'm actually older than Jerry Phillips, so I don't feel quite so bad.
Jerry's the young one here, huh?
I still do the fair races. I do Osborne, Stockton, and Norton. Norton, I don't think they're just going to run fair races this year. I've done them in the past, but they've kind of cut out from a regular schedule, although I hear Stockton's there is possibility they're going to add a few races there, so we'll see what happens. But that's enough. One night a week's good enough for me now. I did 3 nights for a long time, and so now the one night a week's all right.
How'd you pick this year? Why this year to call your retirement?
Well, I've had a few health issues the past couple of years, but I always said when the fun went away, it was time to get out. And you know, everybody here, drivers, owners, you guys, the fans, everybody, you know, you do it because you love the sport and it's fun, and I still do. But you know, it's a 90-minute trip to Hayes from Smith Center, and you know, it used to be that when I was younger, when I was 20, 30, and even 40, I could get home at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was still pumped, so I'd sit up on the computer and do my stories and results and send them out, go to bed 4:30, get up, go eat breakfast with the guys on Sunday, and head to church. Can't do that anymore. It just doesn't work that way. So I just decided it was time. I wanted to go out on my own terms, and that things are still good, and I want to go while I can. I don't want to get to the point to where it's not fun or, you know, things just force me to get out. I just want to go while the going's good.
You know, not only in your announcing, you also did a newspaper years ago called Jayhawk Racing News, right?
Had the Jayhawk Racing Journal, and I had that, I think, for around 5 years, and we covered all of Kansas and then parts of Nebraska, Colorado, Oklahoma, and Missouri, and boy, that kept the guy hopping.
Oh, I'll bet.
And I still tried announcing, and then weekends I had off. You know, I remember one weekend I did the Liberal and then Beaver, Oklahoma thing, and one weekend it was Humboldt on Friday and Caney on Saturday and Yates Center on Sunday, and that was a long weekend.
Wow.
And go down to Topeka once in a while, and I know one night, one day I went to the drags at Heartland Park. The big boys, the NHRA boys were in town, and then that evening went out to Thunder Hill and caught some races there, and then stopped Midwest Raceway. I don't know if you guys have been here, the 8 Mile drag strip in Manhattan.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys, unbelievable how many vehicles they have. They were still running at 1 o'clock in the morning, so we stopped there for a while. So that was 3 things in one day. But it was a lot of work. I mean, 8 months of the year, you couldn't afford to have a full-time staff, so there were just 2 or 3 of us, and you got 4 months off. But even that, you was trying to do a monthly issue and trying to do a builder's guide, and it got to be frustrating when everybody was celebrating holidays and I'm in the office on Memorial Day or Labor Day or whatever and typing stuff all day. So it was fun, but it was a lot of work, and I enjoyed doing it. And but the opportunity arose, we were able to sell it, and so that's what they did. That's what we did.
What? Go ahead, Mel.
You first.
I was
Come
going.
on.
What?
Age before beauty.
There you go. What got you involved in the announcing? By the way,
Really?
I mean,
That's what I was going to ask.
okay, sorry.
Really
okay.
kind of a fluke. We had a track in Smith Center back in the days in the 60s and 70s. And I know Sammy was there a few times. Shelby was there and raced. And I had a friend of mine. We had a friend of ours who had muscular dystrophy and went wheelchair bound at 4th grade. And we just started, we went to the races locally. And then as we got older and actually got real driver's licenses, we started going to other tracks around. That was back when we had the 6-cylinder circuit.
Mm-hmm.
And there was Norton and Osborne and Stockton and some other tracks. And just enjoyed going, but I really didn't think about it. And then I graduated in 73 and thought I wanted to get into broadcasting, so I went to Fort Hays State. Had a very bad experience with a roommate and left after the first semester and went back to Smith Center to work. And at that time, the Speed Bowl in Red Cloud, Nebraska had just been open for a couple of years. We used to go to Hastings, Nebraska and watch them on the quarter-mile flat track up there for a number of Friday nights. It was always kind of a fun trip. And we drive by the Speed Bowl, but they were still struggling with numbers, but it got to be there. And then Stub Gleason, who was working with KFRM Radio and lived in Concordia, was getting ready to retire, and I heard about it. And this would have been early 74. So, I thought that might be kind of fun. Never really thought I would get it, so I wrote him a letter, and then one day here come the Lockharts and the Margaretses, the Smith Center, and we want to take you out for lunch. We heard you're interested in announcing. So, well, okay. And went out. They said, we'd like to have you come up and work with Stub a couple of weeks and then take it over. So that's exactly what happened, and the rest is history. It just started in 74 there at the Speed Bowl and went from there.
That's pretty cool. I know that announcing is definitely different than a radio deal, isn't it?
It is.
When we tried to do that thing over at Beloit that time.
That was we got thrown into a mess there. But yeah, that was fun.
But we made her work.
Yeah.
Yep.
You've worked trackside a couple of tracks.
Yeah. But
Didn't care for it, did you?
no.
Don't like it, did you?
No.
Mike, as long as you've been in this racing thing, any spectacular race that stands out in your mind? You've got to have some story, at least of some of these guys around you and behind you.
Well, yeah, if I ever wondered if Sam was at the races when I seen somebody walk by in a straw cowboy hat, I thought Sam's in the pits.
We should have had him wear his cap.
Yeah,
his hat
and then
tonight.
Mel drove the 0 car, and then Jack he drove about everything that you could drive. 77 was his most familiar number, and then I met Jerry out at Waukene when IMCA first got started in Kansas. But unfortunately, I've been to some where there's been some fatalities, and of course, those are things you don't like, but they kind of stick in your mind a lot. I was the year of the Hutch Nationals of the Fire. I was proud to call the race that David Murray broke the IMCA national record as far as most wins. So that was kind of fun, just because I thought, well, that's kind of a part of IMCA history there.
Yeah.
But it was fun. It's interesting. Like I said, I got to get Jerry in on this a little bit, because IMCA Salina Speedway was the first track to sanction IMCA. And I think modifieds, if I remember right, and Jerry could nod, I think he had 4 or 5 cars, something like that. And I remember Nick Sherfick was a promoter at Waukene Speedway. And he called me up in November. He said, Mike, I'm going to have this meeting. And I said, I'm interested in going with IMCA. I'm going to have a bunch of promoters here, and I want you to MC the meeting. I didn't know what I was getting into. He said, I got this young guy named Jerry Phillips going to come and bring his car. So, okay, I don't know who Jerry Phillips is, but we had a meeting out there, and there was promoters from Dodge City and Colby and Goodland and, Norton, Stockton, Osborne, just a lot of promoters around the area, Dodge City. And Jerry brought his car out, and he gave a little spiel about IMCA, and Nick was bound and determined to go that way. And he asked if anybody else wanted to, else was interested. A lot of the tracks now, they wanted to run their own rules, which, for a number of years that was a battle. Every track having their own set of rules, and the car could run this track but couldn't run that track and everything. So IMCA has been kind of a blessing that way. But Daryl Coast is a promoter at Osborne, and Jerry Bennett was a promoter at Norton, and they said they'd go, and started with just the one class, and look at it now. I mean, it just blossomed so much in Kansas now. It's just unbelievable.
There were some ugly cars back then.
There were some real ugly cars, including Jerry Phillips's car. But
they didn't know what to think of it when I took it out. Pick up the microphone, Jerry. Go ahead.
It on?
Turn it on.
Do you remember? You remember that meeting?
Rob Bacon wasn't a real fan of it either.
No.
Oh, really?
Him.
Yeah.
He's the, he was over in the corner with the late model guys.
Oh,
this'll
yeah.
never work. And
Yeah.
that thing's ugly.
It was ugly.
They were ugly.
I did have some pretty ugly looking cars.
But there's different races for different reasons. But there's been a lot of good ones.
That's cool.
What are you going to do in retirement? You're active with ball sports and things like that. You going to continue with that?
Well, yeah. I'm going to stay. I'm an assistant / activity director at Western Plains Village in Smith Center. We have 48 apartments that we cater to the elderly, handicapped, and disabled. So I have to play bingo once a week, and
Have to?
dominoes and pinochle, and those kind of hard, rough things. Have rolls once a week and coffee every morning and stuff. I'm going to do that till I'm 60. I'll be 61 in September, and I'm also the city recreation director, which in Smith Center, believe it, we're pretty active, but it's not a full-time job by any means. And I coach girls softball and enjoy that. I'm still going to hang around the racetrack some. I'm going to go I don't get a chance to watch very often. I'll do that. And I'll probably keep doing the fair races. They're just 2 nights a week, and the fair food at Stockton and some of the places is too good to pass up. So you gotta keep going.
Sure.
Got to keep going with that. So, and I do. I'm tour guide, and I do some couple bus trips a year and have fun with that. So I'll keep busy. I'm going to stay around. When I turn 65, I'm looking at moving to a couple different places, but might move to Hayes. I don't know. Hayes or Branson, one of the two.
Before we move on, and of course you're going to stay here with us all night because you can add into all these stories that we're going to hear. I asked you, was there a favorite track that you had amongst racing again, or working at any of them? Anyone that sticks out in your mind?
No, I mean, I worked with a lot of great promoters. I've been with RPM since it's open, so that's kind of nice. And Rod does a great job there with the program. I'm not bashing any other track by any means.
Sure.
But I kind of enjoy the half miles on when we do the fair races with Norton and that, because it's just a whole different ball game with that. I always enjoy going to the Hutch Nationals back in the days. I haven't been there for a few years, but back in the NCRA days with just when they ran the modifieds and super modifieds and that kind of thing. Franklin, Nebraska was kind of unique because the track actually set down below. When you walked into the grandstands, you were on the top row of the concrete bleachers, and then you could step down. So you were really, I always thought that was kind of a neat place to go. And it's a small 3/8 mile track and lots of action. Of course, any of the quarter miles you go to. I remember I went to Topeka Raceway Park back in the day when they had the little quarter miler. Quarter milers were fun. Jerry was talking about Bud Perky's State Line Speedway, and how that was a quarter mile track during the summer and a pasture during the winter. But different tracks for different reasons. But right now, kind of RPM, just because I've been there since we've started and seen how they've been able to develop and to grow and stuff. So I'll stop with that.
What's your thoughts on possibly losing the track at the State Fair?
Well, I've always liked going there to watch, but since I can remember, and these guys can say yay or nay, that thing's been a 1-lane racetrack for a long time. I wish they could get it widened out I'd like to see it stay just for the history of it. You know, I know there was talk at one time they were going to shorten it to a 3/8 mile and this and that. Now the fair boards think it's different things. I hope it stays just for the history. I'd like to see them actually, though, do some work on it to make it a more raceable racetrack because, you know, nobody likes to run too high because you got the concrete wall there, and that's kind of a, you know, gets in your mind there in the back of your mind. And then, but like I said, Jack and Mel and Sammy and these guys that's ran that track a lot could tell you that. But I hope it stays. I just, like I said, I wish they could just do a little more work on it to where it'd make it a little more raceable track.
You know, while we're on this subject, I'm going to go back to Jack back here. He's actually sat in on some meetings with the Fair Board. You and I talked the other night when I was at your house. Can you tell a little bit about what's going on there at the fairgrounds at Hutch?
Well, I wasn't at their meeting that they had. I didn't know anything about it, and found out about it later. And the Hutchinson newspaper down there, they wanted me to come down and talk to them about that and get my opinion on it. So I went down there and we went out to the racetrack, and that's where they talked about it. And I told them basically same thing that he's saying. I hate to see him get rid of it, and I don't think they're going to, at least for quite some time. They had to put together a 100-year plan or whatever they call it, and that was one of the things that was a possibility, was to get rid of the racetrack. And I tried. They did an article on it, and I tried to emphasize the importance of not destroying history. I said, I understand, you know, we've got to have progress. I mean, progress is going to take place, but I hate to see progress take place at the expense of destroying history. And this track has got a lot of history to it. There's a lot of famous drivers that has raced on that track at one time or another. One of them comes to mind is A.J. Foyt. He's raced there, and Ernie Durr, he's pronounced D-E-R-R, Durr. He's a big-time racer there for all over, and he raced asphalt and dirt both. And I don't think it's going to happen for quite some time. And as far as I know, it's there's only 3 half-mile tracks in the state of Kansas that I know of as far as dirt's concerned, and that's Hutchinson Fairgrounds and Belleville, and what's the one up by Kansas City racetrack?
Lakeside.
Uh-huh. And so I always liked any track. I don't care whether it was a quarter or 3/8 or half mile, but I just hope that I don't live long enough to, and I intend to live to be 100 or so, just, you know, like Sam Brittendall. But I just hope they don't do away with it, and I don't think they will for quite some time, if they ever do.
You know, Jack, back in what year was it? 76 is when you had your fire. What?
No, 1974, July the 28th, 1974.
Okay. I know you want to talk a little bit about the accident.
Well, the accident actually shouldn't have happened, of course, but I had just finished the A feature in the late model stock cars, number 77, and they had the super modifieds lined up on the racetrack, and they had me go up and get my trophy after the race for setting quick time in the time trials for the stock cars. And it was really, really dirty out there, and I was going to tell the car owner that I don't think we should race because it was so dirty they wouldn't be able to see when they first started the race. As I was walking to the race car, already on the track lined up, they announced that they was going to water the racetrack. So I thought, well, that'll be all right, you know. So I never even said anything. I just got in the car and hooked up. And they started us around the track, and which is a normal procedure for that, and then they'd bring the water truck out, water the track down, and we'd run on it then until it wasn't slick. And then by the time we'd get lined out then after they started the race, why it wouldn't be so bad you couldn't see. But they didn't actually water the racetrack. They brought the water truck out and made one lap, just watered the loose stuff clear down to the bottom of the racetrack, and pulled in. Water truck pulled in, they dropped the green flag, and none of us knew that that was going to happen.
Oh, wow.
And so we was trying to run fast enough to keep from getting run over and slow enough to keep from running over somebody. And we made one complete lap, and as we crossed the start-finish line to start the second lap, while George Armstrong up ahead someplace ran over somebody's wheel, and that just started crashing and piling up. And you couldn't see 10 feet in front of your car.
Wow.
And so I was sitting crossways in the track against the back end of Aaron Madden's car, and his fuel tank was the first one that blew up, and he was carrying 36 gallons of gasoline. So him and I were just immediately human torches. And so I was trying to get out, and they were still crashing in there, and I got partway up out of the car, and they're still crashing in. I fell back down in the car and then got up out and on the top of the car and jumped to the infield, and I landed just outside of the flame, and there's two guys grabbed me and dragged me away from the fire, and they both got first and second degree burns just doing that. And Jerry Soderberg, he was on the outside edge of the track, and he had the same experience. He was climbing out of his car, and they were still crashing in, and he wound up on fire and laying on his back on the racetrack. But we all three lived, and two of us was able to go back to racing. I had a 20% chance of surviving when they got me to the burn center. And while we're on that subject, a fellow racer that I'm sitting right next to, Mel Potts, in the late model stock car in '77, we were leading in the point standings at Great Bend and Salina, and the points stay with the race car. And Mel took over driving while I was in the burn center, kept our points up. I'm glad you was that good, Mel. And yeah, you did. And there's a trophy right over there by you that
sitting right here,
that he got, and it shows a star there for Great Bend and for Salina Speedway. And even though I was up in the burn center, KU Medical Burn Center, I won the championship at both tracks while I was in the burn center, and Mel was having fun driving the car.
and you know, I can't call him Mel. I gotta call him Dad.
It's fine.
You
Go
can
ahead.
take us through your story about getting in the car and having the quickener and stuff, and just the difference between your car and his car. I mean, how did that work out?
Well, yeah. Well, the first, I don't know how you drove with the steering so quick. Did you have it that way before you got injured?
I think slow, so I've got to have something to counteract that.
I told Larry he had to.
It just worked good for me.
I told Larry he had to get that quick steering out of there. It was way too much for me. I was bouncing off the inside wall and then the out. I couldn't keep it straight. But we finally got it worked and got it working and got it taken care of. And we were racing at the fair, and I wouldn't remember. I guess it was a feature. I don't know, or the heat. But you had a wide pedal down there, and I reached for. I meant to step on the brake, and I stepped on the gas. And I know my eyes were big as saucers, and I went into number 3 turn, which is almost impossible to run wide open, but I was. I thought I had my foot on the brake. It was too late. Anyway, come out come out doing real good.
Well, you learned how fast you could go in.
Yeah, it was the best thing that ever happened. Not at the time, it didn't seem like it, but and the car was a lot different. You had the different rear end setup. You had a floater in the rear, I believe it was, and Joe Nelson, I'll never forget, took me out at the track, and he says, "Now I want you to get on the brakes right here, and then get back on it when you see that tire right there." Well, there's a lot of tires. They all look alike when you're coming around the corner. Yeah, but it was an experience. But we did have a good experience. We went to Enid, and
Tell me who Joe Nelson was.
Joe Nelson, who he was, I guess he was the owner, sponsor.
Nelson Ford, Minneapolis.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, he was. Didn't he own the engines and the car? Did Larry own the car? How was that?
He was a sponsor.
That
He was a
His
sponsor.
sponsor.
He,
He was the
There you
money
go.
man.
There you go. Yeah. But, yeah, Joe was a good guy, though. He, anyway, I was going to tell about our trip to Enid while you were in the hospital. You talked about having fun. Thing of it is, you were cheating the last time you were down there. And
I've got to address that.
Well, wait.
Okay, before I got burned, we went down there, started dead last in the feature, and we'd been winning, and they protested us. Really hurt my feelings, but not really, because we always took the money home. We never did get outlawed, and they had to, I think it's 8.5 pounds for cubic inch or something like that. Our car was heavy; it weighed 10 pounds for cubic inch, 10 or 11. And so they, Larry Nuff, the mechanic, he couldn't make it that night. Well, that's the night they picked to protest us. And so I'm not a mechanic. I don't know anything about working on them or anything else. So when they went to puff us to see what cubic inch we had, why, we they picked the cylinder, and we took the rocker arms off, and I went to pull the push rods out, and they wouldn't come out. Well, what Larry always did, he'd hold a grease rag over them so it wouldn't squirt oil all over the place. And so I said, "Well, the push rods won't come out." I said, "You got a roller cam." Well, as soon as they said that, I knew we wasn't supposed to have a roller cam. And so they said, no, we don't have a roller cam. And I said, "Well, how come push rods won't come out?" And I said, we turned so many RPMs, well, we just had to go that route, but we don't have a roller cam. Well, they said, "Well, can you run a roller cam in Salina?" I said, "Nope." And we could, but they didn't need to know it. And so we were legal for what we were protested for. That's what the deal was. And so the track owner, when he paid me, why, he said, "Well," he said, I think you got a roller cam in there." But he said, "That's not what was protested." And so Mel got in on the second teardown. And there was happened to be a different engine in there. And so when they lifted the hood to check them out that time, that's what they protested when Mel was driving it, was for a roller cam.
Mhm.
And the guys that protested the first time, they looked down and said, "We're screwed again." He said, "That's a different engine." So it took their protest money home both times.
Mhm. That's the night I did have a clean sweep, you know.
Right, that's what I, just go ahead and tell them about that.
Well,
Both nights we had a clean sweep.
it was, well, I'd never raced there before, and I was walking around talking to certain people about who did what and their habits and this and that. Of course, Buck Cadwell and some of them guys, and You can't outrun them, but anyway, they started me dead last in the heat, in the semi, in the trophy dash, and the semi and the feature. There was 4 races, and I started dead last and won every one of them. And the feature, it took me several laps to get to the front, and I come in, and the guys in the pits said, "What took you so long?" But that was an experience. That really was. That was a lot of fun. I remember Larry was a little late getting there one night to Enid, and I asked him what happened. He said, "We got stopped by the ambulance in Wellington." Is it Inman? Oh. Kingman. Okay. Yeah. He. I guess the sheriff was also the ambulance driver.
Yeah.
So, since you're on the subject of getting to the races, you got any crazy stories getting to the races
nothing ever
or
happened
coming
to
home?
us. No, everything was fine. Except
I
for
think-
losing the car, and
yeah.
losing the trailer.
Yeah, not much happened.
No,
Exciting.
Let's hear about the time that the car passed you.
Yeah, it was a fast car, especially with a dead engine.
Yeah.
We had broke the motor in Colorado National. We were between Denver and Lyman. I guess that road is kind of dippy. We had a cable running under a bar and tied to the front bumper, and it rubbed through. And we were doing about 70, 75, and I felt the road felt dippy, and I felt something a little strange, and I looked in the rearview mirror, and the car was just backing off the trailer, and it had that big wing on top, and it came off, and I slowed down, and the car went by us like it was on the way to the races. Went down through the median, down the opposite lane, up a steep hill, and through a snow fence. And that's where it parked, and the car wasn't running. So Bob and I, we tried to take the Suburban up over the hill and got high centered.
Yeah, got stuck.
So we couldn't.
Yeah.
We just had a terrible time. Anyway, we did get the car back down on the road. People were starting to stack up.
Watching this, huh?
Yes. And there was a truck driver stopped to help us, and he was directing traffic. He says, "Please keep moving. We're making a movie."
Yeah, and it
So
wasn't.
That was an experience.
It wasn't a quarter of a mile down the road was a big concrete
Yes.
culvert. I mean,
It'd have been.
if it had went down in there, we'd have just
it'd
kept
have
on
been
going. Yeah.
So
Well,
no
why-
damage to the car?
No, it
No,
stayed up.
no.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
little.
Only the Potts.
Plastic nose.
No, I could tell you somebody else had a similar experience. One night we went up to Hastings to the races, and Jerry Trumbull from Arnold, which is north of Hastings, coming to town, going down Burlington Street, which is just like 9th Street here in Salina or whatever, the main drag. And the racetrack was on the very south end of town. When they went down through town, the car come off the trailer and they didn't know it. And there was a little drive-in downtown, and that car actually took a turn and went into the drive-in and pulled right into a stall like it saw and just stopped. And they didn't know it until they got to the racetrack. And the guy at the pit gate said, "Where's your car?" And I said, "Well, back here." And they said, "No, it's not." They thought they were joking. Got out, no car. So they went back, and here's this little car hop. She went out to this car, and here's a race car parked in a stall, and
Just
nobody
like
in
it.
it. So it's happened to a few others too. So,
Yeah.
but that's interesting. You're lucky.
They say the young drivers learn some things from the old drivers, but I've got a little story to tell about Jerry, me and Bob. Bob and I are standing on top of the trailer watching Jerry in his race. We evidently weren't up yet, and he's going from the back to the front, just lickety split. And I'm watching him, and Bob's standing there watching him. And I said to Bob, I said, "How in the heck does he do that?" And Bob said he works his butt off, that's how. And he just kept right on watching the race. I got a message. I had realized that I was getting a little bit lazy on my job out there racing. And sometimes the guys will do that.
Bob-
And you don't even realize it.
Mel, your son doesn't have a problem with telling you when you're not doing it good enough.
He never got, I tell you, when he was quiet is when I was worried more than when he was saying things. He bailed me out a lot of times. I couldn't have done it without Bob, I'll guarantee you.
I know.
Yeah,
There's a lot of people that
I have fun.
do without Bob.
I have
That's right.
fun going around working on the guys' cars. I know I'd gone over, and the funny story I got to tell about Sam. I was over. He asked me to come down and scale his car one afternoon, and so I went down there, and of course we did it right there in the car lot, you know, and we had her all jacked up, and I had the scales underneath the car and went around, and gosh, Sam, something's wrong with your car. You can hand him, Mike, because I'm sure he's going to have a comment. I said, Sam, there's something wrong with your car. I don't know what we got going here, but I ended up walking around the other side of the car, and one of my scale pads wasn't even under the tire yet. It was sitting out in the parking lot. So his car ended up being okay after all. But no, I always enjoyed going over to Sam's and lining front ends and scaling and for him. And Sam, you got any comments?
I know a lot of stories, but I don't want to get Bruce in trouble.
Oh, well, Bruce, okay, go ahead. Corey's here, he can take it.
Yeah.
I might get him in trouble too.
We were on the subject of going and coming to the races. Did you ever lose your car off the trailer?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
a couple times.
yeah.
In Enid, Oklahoma, coming out of the racetrack, and then going to Salina one night. We had most trouble going home at night after the races.
Imagine that.
Took a long time to get home sometimes.
I got a little story to tell about Tony. We were racing in Great Bend, and we were on our way. We got just the other side of Brookville. A friend of mine was driving the truck. We blew a tire, and the whole thing spun around in the highway and rolled over in the ditch facing the opposite direction. And Tony's mother and Larry, her husband, were sitting on a car seat in the back in the bed.
Under
we
a
had
topper.
a topper on
Yeah,
it, yeah. We
yeah.
had a seat back there.
Yep.
But we also had tools and gas cans and jacks and everything else. We were on the side, laying in the ditch, and here come Larry and his wife. She was pregnant with Tony at the time.
Now we know what's
And
wrong
that's
with
what
Tony.
what happened to Tony.
There's the family
He
tree.
got dropped on his head.
Yeah.
Jack, if you don't mind, could we go back to your accident again? I'd like to. Jerry and I were talking a little bit before the show started about his first fire suit he had. What did your driving suit pertain to?
Didn't have one.
Same color as fire, wasn't it?
What was you wearing?
Just it was a knit stuff that burned real fast.
Nylon windbreaker,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
And Larry Knopf, who was the mechanic on the car, mechanic and the owner, on 77 on the stock car, not the modified that got burned in. His wife made uniforms for me and all the crew, and on the fire where they're showing the fire and they're showing me jumping from the top of the car, which they call the leap for life. Well, most of my clothes was burned off at that point.
Really?
We had a picture of that up on our monitor there. I don't
And
see it.
was,
Think.
at that time, it was a good thing that I didn't have a fire suit on, because the fire suits back then that most of them was wearing was only good for about 7 to 10 seconds, and then they started, and then they were harmful to you.
You got like an oven in there. something.
Yeah, and I was in the fire for 27 seconds. So if I'd have had a fire suit like they was having back then, why, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And Jerry Soderberg had one of those fire suits on, and for no longer than he was in the fire, they picked pieces of it out of his back and chest and in the burn center for a long time. So it was lucky for me that I didn't have a fire suit on at that time.
And you know, back then the seats weren't all that complicated like we have today. I mean, the full containment seats with the headrests and all that. And you guys, I know, didn't have much of a seat as far as keeping you in the car. You did you also wear like a harness with a chain that hooked to the roll cage? Did I remember that?
Well, the chain was hooked to the frame of the car, and then the harness, it was just to keep it from leaning over
Right.
like that. And
That was something you had to unhook before you got out of the car, right?
yeah, and it had a quick, it had the same,
Yeah,
it had the same latch on it as your seatbelt did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had one too, and I threw it away after I seen what happened to you.
Well, that didn't have anything to do with it.
No, but it,
The unfortunate thing was, and Jack could maybe back me up on this, but the fire trucks were outside the racetrack. They weren't on the infield, and when they were trying to get in, there were so many cars there. There were some tow rigs from cars that already competed was blocking the road, and the fire trucks couldn't get into the racetrack.
And another deal that I remembered about it also was that back then a lot of the wheels and rear end housings and all that were made of magnesium, and once the magnesium started burning, I mean, they would just like explode when they'd spray water on it. So it actually got bigger.
Well, the reason that the fire trucks weren't there is because the promoter and the city or county, whichever it was, come to a disagreement as to what it was going to cost for them to have the fire trucks out there. There was no fire trucks there. The fire trucks came from the fire station.
Wow.
And so that was the deal on that. And I'd like to mention what I've been told, and as far as I know, it's so. There was because there's something good comes out of most tragedies, and one of the things that was good that came out of that, I was told that legislation was introduced in Topeka that there could not be any when you had racing going on, they had to have a fire truck there, and they had to have an ambulance there in the state of Kansas. And that was passed a while after the accident happened. Now, whether that was the cause of it or the reason that it came about, I don't know, but I was told that it was. And so that's something good that came out of that. And also the next season then, every place that we ran around here, fire suits were mandatory, and fuel cells were mandatory, which they weren't in that race. And gloves were not mandatory, but strongly suggested. And so that's some of the things that came about after that fire.
You know, after you got healed up again, you did climb back in the car, right? And raced for another couple years?
I raced 3 more years.
3 more years after that? Yeah. And did you have any more accidents with fire after that? Or getting burnt after that? You and I were talking about it at home, and can you tell that?
Yeah,
called me up and told me
I've burned three times, 3 different times. But that one was the worst though. And I was burned a second time with scalding water and antifreeze. I was driving a vehicle that I noticed it was in the summertime, and I noticed that it was, I just drove it about 25 miles, and I noticed there was something dripping underneath it, and I looked under there, and the bottom radiator hose was dripping. So I got a screwdriver and got on a creeper and rolled under and reached up there to tighten that radiator hose, and the instant I touched the clamp, the hose blew off, and I got burnt, scalded, and had to have this arm reskinned again. And then when I operated the speedway out there while I was working on the water truck and under the hood, and shorted my watch band out
On the battery.
on the battery, and got an electrical burn. And so I've been burned 3 different times, 3 different ways, and none of them was enjoyable. I can tell you that.
No, I'll bet not. Jerry, you and I was talking about your first fire suit.
Yeah, it was painter overalls, and my wife got some kind of stuff that she
You
washed
soaked
them
it in,
and
huh?
like wearing a goddamn cardboard box. But, we didn't know we could. We just started racing. We thought we better have something kind of fire retardant. They were cotton. Cotton wasn't supposed to burn quite as fast,
Right.
supposedly. And I know how Jack feels. I was running a motor in my shop. It's been probably 10 years ago, and I reached over to do the same thing. I noticed the hose swelled up on this motor I just shut off. It was getting hot. It was about 240, and when I reached over there to tighten that hose, it blew off, shot me right in the belly. And
Wow.
oh man, I just can't imagine how bad that is.
There's your old hot rod right there. Look at there.
There it is.
That's painful, isn't it?
Oh, it was horrible. I spent a night or 2 in the hospital, and I just can't imagine what Jack went through.
It's
How
unbelievable.
far? Tell us a little bit from you racing. How many years have you been racing, by the way?
No, I want to say maybe 85 or 4, something like that.
You've been racing 85 years?
No.
Oh, since 85. I got
My
you.
wife probably. You can't hear, you can't see, you can't.
Look, you're rubbing up on Brian in that picture they put. Oh God, who's that?
Tell us a little bit about, how racing has involved as far as the safety. Like I was telling, the seats and the helmets and the belts and the Hans devices.
Yeah, when we started out, we got a fiberglass seat that kind of had a wraparound.
Yeah.
Moved up, down.
There you go.
And then, to get a decent helmet, I was trying to think what kind of helmet I had the first time, it wasn't much of a helmet.
Weighed about 10 pounds though, didn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I started in a street stock, and I raced it 4 or 5 times and tipped it over in Wichita, and that was the done of that deal. And we built our own car then, and run a Nova for 2 or 3 years, and then they in Hutch, Dan Richardson said he was in this area, was going to be like the Sherficks were out west. He was going to start IMCA, and they brought a modified in and had a meeting, and this is what we're going to run next year. And then him and Cowboy Casino guy, I can't remember his name.
Oh, I
You
know.
remember that guy that ran the Cowboy Casino and they run the
Jeff
racetrack out at Hutch? Anyways, Dan and him got in a deal, and the racetrack sat empty for a while, and C-Ray said, well, we ran about 5 cars, we run 10 times maybe, and then the next year C-Ray run Hutch and Wichita, and supposedly they were going to be sanctioned, which never happened. But we raced a lot. We raced the fairgrounds and raced out at Liberal, and shortly after that, Nick Sherfick called me and asked me if I'd come out to there and show this car, and believe it or not, that was probably my The first car I had was a leaf spring car. The second car I got from a guy called Vic Paddock, and he's an old super modified racer.
Yep.
And it had 4-bar suspension on it, and a Jacob slider on the back like a sprint car, and that thing would go sideways and forward. And,
Had some quick steering on it too.
quick steering, 3-to-1 steering on it.
Brian.
And,
Brian bought that car from you, and he wrecked it unloading it off the trailer.
it was fast. I mean, you drove it was 3/4 turns a lot. It was fast.
Yep.
Sammy brought one of my cars, one of them.
Yeah,
back
Sam
cars,
had one
and
too, that's
won a
right.
championship with that, I believe.
Yep.
And that, remember the old truck steering?
Yeah.
That was I kind of wish I still had a steering like that.
I like that.
Sam was
Driving
always,
bus.
you always did have your steering wheel laying down a lot.
Yeah.
Just more comfortable, or?
Yeah, I liked it like that.
Well, it's actually easier
Like a
to
sprint car.
drive, you know.
Yep.
You know, here you kind of got to use your arms more. Here you have your shoulders
Yeah.
kinda helping you drive it.
Yeah.
And that was a good old car.
Yeah.
Jerry, what made you decide to get into the racing game?
Well, I lived on a dead-end street. I bought a house for $8,000, and I just got married, and a guy across the way I walked over there, he had old Camaro, it was white with black stripes on it, and roll cage in it, and I looked it over, and one day he knocked on the door. Will you be interested in driving my race car? I said, yeah. And I said, when? Oh, it'd probably be a year or so before you get it fixed up. It was the end of that summer, we had it going. And the end of that summer, I had it wrecked. But that's how I got, actually, a fella named Roger Colgan.
Oh, I know that name.
Craig Colgan runs sometimes, that's his dad.
Yep.
He's the one that actually got me started in the dirt track race.
Oh, be darned.
Where'd you come up with your number?
Jeff Techner, I don't know if you ever, he helped me for years, and he raced a stock car a little bit, and his number is 66, and his uncle was real good friends with the Doties, and out of Newton, and they run a 66.
66,
and
yep.
Everybody thought Phillips 66 would be cool too, so we just stuck with that.
Sam, since we're on numbers, your old number's back out on the racetrack this year. That is pretty cool, huh?
Shocked me, man.
Yeah.
Bruce come down to the shop and said, hey, will you come out tomorrow night and help me push Corey's car in? He's out of town and Bruce had a bum leg.
That was
Yeah.
quite the story you gave
Yeah.
you there, didn't it?
So we went out there at the mall, and I stand there and I got to thinking, what's he want me out here for? There's 50 guys out there. And they unloaded that car, and I seen 48. I about had a heart attack. Yeah, it was
That's
so
pretty dang cool.
That was
isn't it?
cool.
Yep.
Yeah, you can't ask for.
How'd you get the number?
It was on Dick Perry's car when I drove for him 100 years ago.
That one there?
Holy mackerel.
Just other big cars back there.
We didn't have seatbelts, we had ropes.
You guys can walk over here and take a look at that monitor and see that.
Could we tell them about,
It makes you feel pretty honored when somebody does that for you, doesn't it?
Sam, can we tell them about your car that you had all lettered up nice and pretty and you went to the car wash? Letters all come off.
Yeah. Painted over the plastic on the I think that was Bruce's fault too.
Yeah.
For those of you that may not know, these cars now the bodies are built out of aluminum, and most of them are handmade by these guys. They're quite good craftsmen, and they come with plastic to protect them on one end, and that's the end that's the side that you use to the outside. That's the clean side.
When you build the piece right.
When you build the piece right, that's the
Sometimes you
outside.
build them the other way, and the
Yeah.
plastic's on the inside.
You've built a couple for me that way.
Yeah.
I don't
And
understand.
they didn't take the plastic off before they applied the
I
decals.
remember them yellow fire street too.
They're looking at the monitor and the stuff that Dave's put up for them. There you go.
Sam, we were looking at your flames.
They're backwards.
Are your flames going backwards there?
Probably. I was going backwards a lot of the time.
The top ones, not so much the bottom ones.
Dad, you built a lot of cars from out of your garage. I know you built a car for Sam one year, and you built Dowers a car, and I think
What was it 39 cars we built
Out of the
over the
single
time we
car,
lived there.
out of the single car garage.
Isn't that something?
Over
Hey,
on-
look at that. That car's right beside Sam. It says Croft Oil. That's my Nova. When I first started racing.
Look at his eyes. He's like, holy cow, you guys found a
Red
picture.
top, white. Says Croft Oil Company, Galveston.
I'll be darned.
I'm curious how you come up with the number. I'm always curious too on car numbers. How'd you come up with number 0 of all cars?
Profit in racing.
Makes sense.
I think anybody would doubt that.
Jack, how about your number? It seems to stick around your family too.
Yeah, well, when I lived in Wichita, I had a appliance and air conditioning shop there, and one of the guys that works for me, his older brother would stop by on Saturday morning and talk about racing and tell me he used to have a race car and he's thinking about building another car. And after he stopped in for 2 or 3 weeks, he asked me if I'd be interested in driving it. I said, well, what would you build? He said, well, build a Ford. I said, okay, what engine you have in it? And he said, I put a 292 in it. It was years and years and years ago. And I said, well, 312 is legal. And he said, there's a car I used to drive.
Yep.
And he said, well, it's not necessarily the biggest engine on the track that always wins. And I said, well, you build it and I'll try it and then I'll let you know whether I'll drive it or not. So he did, and the reason he chose that number is he wanted a double number, and that was at 81 Speedway, that was the only double number that was available. And the first time that we raced that car, well, it was a 56 Ford, and got it all ready to go, and he wanted to take it to Belleville to race its first race, which I didn't think was a very smart thing to do. But me and a friend of mine and Orvin McChaney that owned the car, we went up there, and there was racing late models, and that most of them was out of Topeka. They had windshields in them, and a big guy and the owner, he was putting a hail screen on there for windshield after we got up there. And I went around and looked at our competition and come back, and Foreman said, well, what do you think? I said, well, I was truthful. I said, I don't see anything in our class, which meant what I was really saying was we were outclassed. And so they had time trials. Well, I knew we didn't have any business being in the A feature, so I tried to time in for the B feature. Went up and looked. Well, I run as hard as I could go. I told him, I said, we ain't got any business in the A feature. I said, but I think I still better run as hard as I can go in the time trial, and maybe we'll catch the front end of the B feature. And he said, yeah, that'd be a good idea. He never did say much. And so I run as hard as I could, and went up to see where we timed in, and we timed in, I don't know, either third or fourth place. I said, well, that ain't right. I said, that wasn't right. Well, he said, don't worry about it. And we didn't even, we borrowed tires, the lowest tires that we could find from a tire shop, and they were brand new tires to put on the rear and run high gear instead of second. And long story short, we took first in the heat and first in the trophy dash, and wound up running, started fourth in the A feature, third or fourth, and wound up taking second in the A feature that night, and was the top money winner of the night because of the other races.
Of all the
We
others.
run everything. We won everything we ran in except the A feature. We took second. So that's how we wound up with 77, and then everything I drove after that on the late models before we run 77.
Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to call this a pit stop so you guys get something to drink. Think about the next part of the show, okay?
All All right.
You've been great so far, so keep it up. Thank you.